going. So welcome everybody to day 3 of leading through adversity. And we're so glad that you are on here today. We have one more day on Friday. We're skipping tomorrow. And then we have Friday. So Friday will be the last day at 2 Central for our last group discussion. So today and Friday, we are going to be looking some at, because of John's 3rd and 4th points that he makes, it talks about how crisis reveals the true character of a leader. So let's just jump in with our questions. And Linda, if you want to unmute at some point and talk, feel free to do that, okay? Or if you want to, yeah, I guess that's probably the best thing to do. So, because I know you're driving. You won't be driving forever, though. All right, so let's jump in and let's look at the first question. I was going to ask you, do you agree or do you disagree with John's statement that crisis reveals a leader's character rather than makes their character while they're in the middle of it? What are your thoughts about that?
I'd say I somewhat agree.
Okay.
Just because I think that well, I guess it's maybe the same thing. It reveals it, how do I say? Maybe the making it is character that was potentially already there. So it brings it out more. So in a sense, it makes it, because that might not have ever been called upon outside of crisis. So it's making it, but you know, you have to have something to start with too. So to some extent it's revealing it, but so that's kind of why I say it feels like kind of a combination. I mean, if somebody really does not have anything to bring to the table, they're not going to all of a sudden have that because there was a crisis. But there can certainly be things that were never considered, or maybe we're not even so much hidden as just the unknown that are brought about. But like I said, so it's a kind of a gray area, I guess, depending on how you define reveal.
Right.
Rather than
definitely see your point on that, for sure. Anybody else have a perspective on that? Karen, unmute if you're going to talk. There you go.
I hate to disagree with
That's
John
okay.
in any way. However, a tad disagreement in terms of, I do believe that it does reveal a leader's character, but there are people I think that don't realize that their character shows, and I think that they have a learning opportunity there. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Good point. The other thought?
So revealing, and if what it reveals is not maybe what is needed or what it could be, you know, and he does come to that in the next thing, that you can shift gears. So it's just a matter of, do you shift gears in the thick of it and actually end up maybe revealing something that again, is it a reveal? Is it new? Who knows? But you know, is it happen that you shifted gears in the middle of it, sort of making that be the like the reference to Einstein. I think that was, you know, not maybe today's topic, but how when you're in the middle of it is different than afterwards, right? I'm trying to think of the exact phrasing, you know, the quote. I'd have to go through my notes about that, but you know, so then it's hard to distinguish between, is it a reveal or is it something new, or is it, you know, what have you. But all of those would be different than somebody who goes through the whole crisis, afterwards realizes, man, I really dropped the ball. What can I do differently next time? That would be after the fact. But, you know, I think, you know, like Karen said, it also is sometimes something that ends up coming up that they never knew they had, or they start to recognize something that's not a strength or not good, that just never was, again, going back to, I think, the first day, being amplifying those things that are not good, where we have something that's a bit of a, you know, a weakness, a gap, something like that before didn't really matter, and we could just kind of ignore it, or nobody even noticed it. We didn't even notice it, but all of a sudden it becomes more noticeable. And so then how do you respond to that?
Good point, Jill. Anybody else want to share thoughts on that? Did you see how I reworded that question? It didn't say disagree, and your workbook does it. Because I wanted you to think about, do you agree or do you disagree? You might, and you might not agree, and that's okay, Karen, if you don't agree with John Maxwell.
Well, I do pretty much. It was just that one little tweak, giving people a chance
right,
to recognize it and change.
It's kind of a chicken and egg question, isn't it?
It is. It is. Yeah.
I mean, really, it's kind of the same kind of question. All right. Any other thoughts on that one before we move to the next one? Okay. So why do you think a crisis is such an effective test of a leader's internal makeup?
Why?
Why do you think a crisis is such an effective test of a leader's internal makeup?
I think at the base level, how you react.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, and I used to be kind of a hothead, and I mean, in some cases I still am, but I've had to learn to, you know, take a step. You know, like to me, it's maybe a sign of maturity that I just try to eliminate the drama. So I've had to learn to kind of just keep it even keel. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you have learned you've done some introspective work, it sounds like, and you have increased your self-awareness so that you know, hey, when this happens, I need to do X, Y, Z to be effective, right?
Well, I mean, it's really so many things. It's not worth, you know, I mean, you just learn that it's really not worth it. Everything is going to be okay. It's not worth getting upset over about. The only thing you're doing is getting upset.
Mm-hmm.
It's not constructive.
So as the question of an effective test of a leader's internal makeup, it seems to me that if you're thinking, why is a crisis an effective test? Because when everything is going well, you can just float, you know, things don't come up, you know, if you have maybe some habits that are not ideal, or,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that, you know, everything just kind of rolls in spite of that. Or if there are ups and downs, they're pretty minor ones. And, you know, so it doesn't get pushed. It doesn't get pushed to a point where it really, you know, it becomes important that, you know, the sort of your internal makeup, you know, it's all the fluff is kind of pulled away, and what's really at the core of a person, you can't avoid it, you can't ignore it, because you can't just kind of float and whatever happens and have good results from that, you know, or progress, or you know any kind of the sort of thing that you want to have happen. So that kind of status quo just doesn't work anymore.
Right.
And so it becomes, you know, one way or another, something's gonna show up, you know, and be a test of that and your response to it. And what do I do now? Because you can't just do nothing, you know, or do the bare minimum and kind of say, oh, everything's going to just kind of be on autopilot. It'll be fine. It'll continue the way what we did last month is going to be the same next month. You know, you have to do and think and, you know, respond.
I think too, your personality. I mean, if you're a jerk and you've been working on it, I'm just saying, you know, if you're the kind of, I'm not talking about us as leaders, but other leaders that you look, I mean, any leader, if you've been like that, every leader's not a great leader. So if that's how you've been and you've never worked on it, or if you're hot tempered and you're not like Karen, who's really worked on it, and it's work. I mean, it is work,
right,
to kind of help with those things that we consider things that we would rather change. So if you haven't been working on that over your time as a leader, you're just going to, like I said, you're going to fall back on that mentality.
yes,
And it's going to just pop right out, and everybody's going to see you for your true colors. And
yes.
Yeah,
that
All you gotta do is watch somebody become unhinged.
yeah, we've seen a lot of that. But it's to me that if it does show your internal makeup, and people that see things in themselves that they want to improve and they're working on it. They're not going to fall back on that way back personality. They're going to have coping skills that are going to help
Right.
them be a true leader at this point because they've been working on it and training themselves as they go.
Well, also, I think not everyone in a leadership position is a leader.
Correct.
So you can have people who are leaders, like that's their title, that's
title,
the position they're in, but they may not have actually, reached that point through leadership and through, sort of the process that would result in a true leader, right? So if they ended up there, I don't want to say by accident, but sometimes things happen. People get into positions for reasons that don't really support their effectiveness as a leader, if that makes sense. So like if somebody got a promotion because they, have the right appearance or they know the right person, all of a sudden they're in this leadership position and they don't know what to do with it. And they might be able to float, kind of, just kind of skate along on that for a while. But when things kind of start to fall apart, then they're not equipped to deal with it necessarily, So I think that's where leader and leader are not always the same thing. You know what I'm talking about? So this could be a test of that, are you a leader in title only, or
Right.
are you actually a leader? And if you
Deep.
are not, are
Right.
you prepared to do what you need to do to jump on that and learn and shift gears and actually bring something to the table that you didn't previously?
And they have to see it themselves. I mean, we can't. It isn't until maybe they realize that they're being ineffective by maybe going off the deep end. I mean, we can't make anybody do anything, right?
It's exactly right. I love Sally's point of just, stress will bring out those negative qualities and make them glaring, right? And you can tell if people have worked on them or not worked on them because stress has a tendency of pushing people's buttons, right? So I think that's exactly what we're talking about here.
Or care to work on them. They may
Right.
not care to work on them.
Yeah.
You're right.
It just, and then they just get spotlit,
Mhm.
however that word goes.
Yeah. All right. What about, I feel like I know what everyone's going to say to this, but a negative or a positive perspective helpful during a crisis. I think the why part is more important for us because I think all of you will say positive perspective based on what we've discussed so far, right? Anybody saying negative? I don't think so. So why is that helpful? Let's focus on the why part of that question.
Because you're showing them a way out.
Okay. Tell us more about that, Karen.
Well, I just, if you're positive, you're going to be more of an example to people. Whereas if you're negative, you're going to shut them off and they're not, they're going to not grow from that. So if you're positive, they can draw from that positivity and they're going to maybe listen to some suggestions or, feel better. I always told my ex-husband, people need to feel like they are so happy they met you when they met you. You want to be a positive influence on people.
Well, I was going to say, because you're an example either way.
Exactly.
You want to be the positive example because they are looking to you, and one way or another, that example and direction that you go is something that people are going to notice and pick up on and tend to follow.
I think it's have you ever, the kids, the program for kids and adults too, but it's called To Fill Your Bucket. And
Right.
either you're filling someone's bucket or you're emptying someone's bucket. And they don't want to come to you to have their bucket emptied. They want to come to you to have their bucket filled.
It's a really great analogy.
Yeah. And as much for ourselves, because our positive attitude first starts with us not only putting it out there, but feeling that way ourselves. you know, and filling our own bucket sometimes from
Right.
wherever we need to get that from,
Right.
in order to be able to turn around and do that. So I would say that the impact of a positive attitude is first on the leader for their own
Mhm. Ownership of that,
stability, and then making sure to work to transfer that to the people that are looking at them and kind of watching, and
Yes.
getting that hopefulness and encouragement, to go along with, certainly substance in terms of resources and support and some training and some, that sort of thing. But overall, none of that is going to have the same impact unless the positivity and positive expectations and all that sort of thing is the framework that it comes in.
Yes. So I hear somebody in the background. Could somebody shut a door?
I think that's me. Hold on.
Okay, thank you. So how can a leader keep a learning posture during a crisis? Sally chuckles. Thank you, Jill.
Fortunately for us, we have people around us who are giving us good information and helping us with lots of ideas. And I think we have to be open to that and take the time for it. That's what I think.
So setting aside time is critical.
Mm-hmm. Sure, there were a lot of things I could be doing today to enforce, or to not enforce, but to put into place all the stuff I'm learning. I need to put it in practice.
Mm-hmm.
I could have been doing some of that today, but I felt like all day long it was just more information, but it's all important. So I'm glad that we're not on tomorrow. I was thinking we were, but an extra hour to implement.
Yes. Anyone else? How can we keep a learning posture? Gayleen, do you want to share anything about that? How can we keep a learning posture during this crisis?
Well, I think they're right with the saying that we need to allow ourselves the time to do it, to listen and to learn, and to take the time for ourselves, and not just to, okay, well, we'll just do this for this other person or this other consultant or whatever. We need to take the time for ourselves and to help keep ourselves positive.
Mhm.
And doing something like this is bringing more positivity into our life. And then we can take that positivity and pass it on to others.
Mhm.
Like, it's kind of like osmosis. Like, if you're positive, they'll kind of absorb it right from you. But if you're negative and you're always like down, oh, well, this is too bad, no, so sad for me, blah, blah, blah. Well, all of a sudden, everybody else has taken that from you.
Right.
So I think taking the time to keep ourselves positive, like doing things like this, and to,
Mhm.
keep it in our mind, helps us when we're talking to others.
Yes.
And
Investing in yourself, right? Investing in yourself keeps you focused on what you need to be focused on so that you can share that with others.
right.
Very good. And I commend you all for spending this amount of time doing this, because I know this is a lot of time.
But it's so good.
Yeah.
But it's been good. Good.
Oh,
Very
Yeah.
good. Yes.
Good. I felt like it was going to be valuable to people, and that's why I wanted to do it. So I'm glad to hear that it has been.
That's no problem. I'll call you right back.
All right, anybody else? How can you keep a learning posture during a crisis? Anything that we haven't shared?
Hey, Stephanie, it's Linda.
Hey.
Hey, I'm almost home. So, for me, in the middle of this coronavirus situation, I think one of the things to just be mindful of is that information is changing all the time, and I think Crisis has a way, you know, there's new information coming at it. It doesn't matter what the crisis is.
Right.
But just keeping abreast of what the truth is right now. You know, the truth right now may be different than the truth a day ago or an hour ago, and just being aware of that, you know, and having people that are providing that information to the leader can be really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so having people that perhaps can
what the latest masking, I'm pulling real life examples here, what the latest masking recommendation is. I mean, that's changed 3 times in the last 3 days that I've been at work.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's such a good point, Linda, that we have to keep up with the newest and best information, and that really leads into the next question. But before we go there, any other thoughts, Linda, on that?
no, that's it. I'm trying to get my video on now.
Okay, you're home. Yay. Y'all can see Linda now, hopefully.
Yay.
So that goes right into the next question, which was, he spoke about the need for leaders to be adaptable during challenging times. And especially, like Linda said, as information is changing, and each day as things change, you know, suddenly there's a longer time period we have to stay at home or whatever has changed. Because you think about it from the beginning, how many times have things changed, right?
Mm-hmm. Daily,
So
if not more.
what does adaptability mean to you?
It kind of goes along with what I said before in terms of you know, if you kind of catch yourself being negative, you can adapt to being more positive.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like when things change, we have to be willing to change with it.
Yes. Based on whatever information we have at that point, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which might be different than the day before or a week before.
Mm-hmm.
Any other thoughts about adaptability, what that means to you? I also think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier in one of our sessions, that this is forcing all of us to look at things outside of the box, right? Mm-hmm. We're having to make a lot of changes in how we contact customers, how we lead meetings,
Mm-hmm.
you know, how we come home from work. In Linda's situation, we're having to adjust a lot of things on a consistent basis. There she is. Hey, hey. And
Hi, Linda.
now she can see everybody. So it's I think it's important as a leader to know that adaptability does not mean it's going to happen once and that it might not happen again for a while. It may happen the next day or the next hour, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we have to be ready to change whenever it happens and find the best next step, whatever that might be.
I have a couple of people leaders on my team that really fight in the virtual world.
Really?
So they're adapting.
I think a lot of people who were resistant to that before, you know, there's just not an option other than to totally lose your business, you know. I mean, so it's kind of a sink or swim right now when it comes to some adapting. You can kind of, well, decide if you want to do that, and other things it's just, you know, in choosing not to adapt, you'd be choosing not to have a business at all. So it's not really much of an option. But I think
it's an option, but it's not a positive option.
Right, exactly. So, but I think Karen makes a good point that this is something for us as leaders to be incorporating into things, which is, really kind of a no-brainer. Obviously, unless you completely have your head in the sand, you gotta do something to respond to things that are happening. But it can be an embracing the change and adapting sort of gracefully and purposefully and looking for solutions, or it can be kicking and screaming and resisting and moaning and complaining, and I don't want to do it that way. Well, too bad. That's what it is. So a little bit, so you're kind of getting to that positive or negative approach. But then also the people that we're working with. So yeah, I mentioned Karen because you're talking about some leaders. In that case, they probably are embracing virtual now because they don't have a choice. I don't know.
Right.
But sometimes the people we're working with also need to be encouraged to be willing to adapt. So we adapt on kind of on our level of what we're doing, but that's a message that some people that we're working with on our teams or what have you may or may not be prepared to adapt either. And it's interesting to watch them because some of them just kind of like get creative and they're going to do something. If they can't do what they used to do, they're going to do something different. And others get kind of paralyzed and they don't have the adaptation piece of the puzzle. Either they're not thinking of it or they're not willing or they, whatever the reasons are. But I think from a leader's standpoint, helping them to embrace the idea of what can I do to adapt is, just as important as us adapting ourselves.
I thought of you all this morning and I thought about sharing this. Somebody sent me privately a meme. It says, because it kind of goes back to what we talked about yesterday, you play the victim so well. I'm surprised you don't carry around your own body chalk. It kind of goes in.
That's funny.
Oh.
That's funny. So what are some signs that a leader should make a shift during a time of crisis? What are some signs?
When they see things going to hell in a handbasket?
It's kind of obvious, right?
Yeah.
Well, I would say kind of also just if they're feeling, if as a leader you're feeling a large amount of like anxiety and stress, then you need to make a shift. At that point, it might be just a mental attitude shift before you can get to the shift of more practical things. But that's, I think a pretty big red flag. We don't want to be trying to function, and we're not going to be able to function well from a place of high anxiety and stress. So if we can address that to start with, and, again, chicken or the egg, because the more we do things that bring in positive response, the lower our stress level will be. Right. But I think sometimes too, that kind of metaphorical deep breath that we can take and kind of regroup and, make sure that we're not letting ourselves mentally run off with some huge, scary, kind of in the beginning, those distractions are like, things that are all these horrible things that could happen and the anxiety that brings, just kind of stop ourselves and go, okay, wait a minute. What isn't within my control or my influence? What is not? What do I need to let go of and step away from? And, kind of mentally go through that to get our stress or anxiety at a level, if it's present, so that it's not the only thing that is kind of consuming us, because we're not going to be able to move on from there.
I think you made a good point about what can you control and what can you not control, right? So if a leader is focusing a lot of time on what they can't control,
that calls for a shift, for sure.
That calls for a shift, right? Yeah. If you're focusing on everything you can't control, then you have to shift.
For me, I think it's emotion. If I find myself getting emotional, either, anger or crying, that kind of thing. I mean, I try to I've told my directors before that if you're starting to cry about your business, it's not really business, it's more personal, and so to me, emotions are a sign that I need to kind of step back and take a look at everything.
That's a good point. Really good point. Any other thoughts on that question? Okay, so why is conforming during times of crisis a dangerous idea for a leader? What do you think he means by conforming?
Okay, true confessions here. I did not watch this John
That's okay.
Maxwell video. Okay, so I'm not sure what he's talking about. What came to mind for me is if conforming is because it feels safe and it keeps you from thinking outside the box and discovering other solutions, and you know that aspect of things that might be called for to go along with the adapting
Yes.
and all that sort of thing. So you don't want to be so stuck in this is what everybody does or this is what we've always done, that
Right.
don't find new ways of doing things that are called for.
Very good point, Jill.
So I don't know if that's what he meant, but that was what I thought of.
Conform is a word that sometimes makes the hairs go up on my back. And I can think of times when I felt like I should conform, maybe not wanting to conform because of decisions that are out of my control. And it's to the best of our team that I conform. Does that make sense at all? You know?
Well, sure. Because I don't think it's always necessarily a bad thing.
Mhm.
You know, I mean, you could say following the speed limit is conforming. You know, I mean, so in and of itself, it's not automatically bad, but we just want to be careful of what the motivation is, what the results are, you know, the effect that it's having. There are times conforming is because it's not about me, and that might not be what I would choose to do, but that's what we're going to do because whatever, that's everybody voted to watch that movie. So I'll go along with it, even though I don't want to watch that movie, you know, or whatever, you know, so there are times that I think that it's makes sense to do that, but you know, you just want to be thoughtful and purposeful about it and make sure it's not coming from a place of fear or you know, a desire to just not rock the boat. And if you were going to rock the boat, is it appropriate? Sometimes we might feel like rocking the boat, but really probably shouldn't. And it would not be the right move, but it might be in the moment what my mood is. On the other hand, sometimes it's good to shake things up and throw something in there that makes people see things different. You know, so I think that the conformity part of it, it's not just an issue of whether or not you conform, but the details make a difference as far as, you know, what would lead you to conform or not conform, what the results would be if you do or don't, how that's going to impact people, yourself,
Right.
but also everybody else, you know. So, but again, if it's in this circumstance that we're talking about, because you are scared or lazy or any number of things that are probably not very good place to be functioning from, and it keeps you from finding solutions and
Right.
welcoming ideas and things like that, then it would not. Then that's where it would be dangerous, as he mentions.
Remember in leadership, did you already say this? I'm like drawing a blank. If you see the bandwagon, you're too late. But that's hard for me because I'm a you go first person. So that has been, you know, I'm slow to react to things sometimes, but I think this might be like in a time of crisis, if we're just waiting for the bandwagon to come and hopping on, we're really not thinking
Right.
forward for our
Yeah.
teams.
Good point, Sally. Very good point.
It's hard for me because I am typically not that person that is so out of the box creative and thinking.
But I think some of what you could do, Sally, is to go to other people and say, this is, you know, it's not because you're refusing to act or you're, you know,
Oh,
like
no, it
trying to
isn't.
stay in your box.
Yeah.
You might just be saying, you know, what is somebody else doing? Let's talk about this and share some ideas and collaborate. So, you know, it doesn't have to be any individual leader that comes up with all the answers and all the ideas on our own. It can even be going to our teams. They have brilliant ideas. Very often they have some great ideas. So, you know, that the desire to not conform or, you know, have the whole bandwagon thing, it can come from a lot of different places. And I don't think it's necessarily that, you know, you've missed the boat or missed the wagon if you're not in the front. But not everybody can be in the front at the same time. You know, within your organization where you are the one in front as the leader, then it makes sense to be aware of what, you know, that I want to do something, but it doesn't all have to be you know what I mean? I mean, that the responsibility for the ideas and the action and that kind of thing, I don't think lies all the individual leaders or any one person, so much as having an awareness of that this is something that calls for action. Now, what can I learn? Who else can I go to? Who else? What are you other people doing in any place that can feed into that? Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah,
I
for
think
sure.
too, it also goes back to if you remember when we took the DISC assessment
Mm-hmm.
and you look at where you are on the DISC assessment and what your personality style is,
Mm-hmm.
then you're going to be either more likely to be the leader of the bandwagon or less likely to be the leader of the bandwagon based on that personality style. And that doesn't mean that it's wrong. None of those are wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
That you just lead in a different way. You see things differently.
Mm-hmm.
You have different strengths than someone else. So I think you have to remember that, Sally.
I do. I mean, I'm at least trying to run along with the bandwagon.
That's awesome. All right. Where can a leader find the strength to make a shift during times of uncertainty? Where can you find the strength to make a shift?
To consider the alternative if you don't.
Ooh, good, good.
That's a good motivator. Mm-hmm.
Where else can you find the strength? It's kind of like a pros and cons list is what Karen's talking about. Yeah.
Right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I have to run grab something.
Yeah. Where can you find the strength to make a shift? What gives you the strength to make a shift? Where do you pull from?
Well, for me, I would say definitely part of that picture is my faith. And I know that's the sort of thing that's going to be a little bit different for different people. But,
Sure.
I mean, one of those is that I, kind of tend to approach things that this is going to work out. It's going to be okay. That
Sure.
has a lot to do, with my faith, and that being an element of pretty much every aspect of whether it's my business or my family or what have you. And so when that's the underlying feeling, then that gives you, sort of a strength to pull on and to say because you're going in it with the assumption that things are going to work out one way or another, not necessarily exactly the way we want, but it's going to, that it's going to be okay. And I don't know, that just seems to change. When I've talked to people that don't have that, it can be kind of hard to pass that on because it doesn't make sense to them. I'm like, I don't know, I can't explain it. But it changes where you come from. I mean, it changes your approach to life in general. I think for most people, and for me it does. And so in the time of a crisis, the perspective is affected by that. And it does result in some strength and some, kind of, I don't know. I can't explain it, but.
Excellent, Jill. That's great.
I was going to say, and thanks, Jill. I was going to say that I basically get mine through prayer. And, I go and I talk, and he gives me the strength to get through it. And whether it's getting it through it the way I think I'm going to get through it or the way he thinks. But we do get through it, But sometimes, and I agree, it's hard to pass that on to someone else if they don't believe in the same as you do. And I kind of struggle with that part, but I try my best.
Thank you for sharing, Gayleen. Anyone else, where you find the strength to make a shift? I would say collaboration like this too. I mean, when you can collaborate with other like-minded individuals, that can give you the strength, right?
So you feel like you're not alone.
Yeah.
That you're not the only one going through it and dealing with it. And I would say too, when you've got this, the backing of, for for several of us, you know, it's Pampered Chef, and I know it's something different for Linda, but I expect the same, and you know, hopefully in her experience. And it could be even from a traditional business setting. When you feel like you've got support and resources and backing, that again, you're not alone, but in a very practical sense, you've got some solid stability that is there, that you can draw on in, you know, in a big picture sense, but also just in the details of, okay, what's happening and what are we going to do, and how can I take this and use it myself and transfer it to the people that are looking to me, and, you know, that sort of thing. There's a lot of strength in that, I think, you know, as opposed to if you were really feeling like whatever, again, from a business standpoint, whatever company or product or service or something that you're part of doesn't have your back.
Right.
And again, it's one of those things that's always important, but becomes even more important in a time of crisis. That, you know, if you feel like the people that are sort of the, you know, the next step beyond you, if that's falling apart, then what chance do I have? You know, so, and by the same token, our teams could look to us in the same way, you know, that, wow,
Absolutely.
if Jill is falling apart, you know, what do I do? You know, and it's not because I, you know, am the boss or something, but just because that's the relationship that's there. And, you know, I think that is part of the picture. So having the, you know, having the company, having your business, your boss, your whatever, you know, that is solid, then I think transfers that strength.
Absolutely.
The things
When
that you do
leadership
as well.
above you, or the company, your home
Whatever
office,
form
or
it
whatever,
takes, yeah.
is supportive and providing resources.
Right.
gives
You know, I think
strength.
about that, what, you know, with all the things happening with schools right now, and you've got people that are teachers, and in some cases they have very good structure in place. They have good leadership from their administration. Like, you know, I've got two that are still in high school, one also a senior, like Stephanie's daughter. And that's going great. I mean, yeah, they miss seeing their friends, but the school is handling this. I've just been blown away by how well they're handling this. And
Wow.
It's just really been a good experience. And I talked to some other people with either their children or people that are teachers. And, you know, one friend of mine, and she's like, oh, wow, that's a lot different than our school. You know, I mean, and it's just is different. And
Yes.
I don't know what the details are, but all I can
Right.
say is it makes a difference. And I don't doubt some of it, at least in some cases, has to do with, in that example, their principals and their, you know,
Right.
school in general, or their school district, you know, whatever it is. But it, you know, so the teachers, when they feel like they've got a good structure and good support, and again, that's true always for teachers, that it makes a difference when they have good administration and, you know, that's backing them up. But that's just that much more important in a time of crisis.
That's a really good example, Jill. Okay, so let's do some self-reflection to wrap up for today. These are not in your workbook. So,
I'm
what
ready.
did you learn about character in crisis today?
The character shows through.
The character shows through. Okay. Anybody else something differently?
Only to add on to that I think there is an opportunity. Like, we're not doomed. If some, you know, less than awesome aspect of character, ours or somebody else, comes out in this, you can make changes. You know what I mean? You can
Right.
recognize it and work on it, and it doesn't necessarily, you know, but you're less able to kind of hide and, you know, gloss over
It's funny
things.
you mentioned that, Jill. We're going to actually hit on that in just a minute. So before we go there, let's think about and reflect on what are 3 character qualities. You may not think of 3, it's okay. But 3 character qualities that you have that are going to help you lead well in crisis. 3 character qualities that are going to help you lead well that you have right now in crisis. What's going to help you? What are your character qualities that you have that will help you lead well? Anybody want to share?
I'm making a list.
You're making a list. Good.
Okay, I have 3.
What are your 3, Karen?
My first one is rock steady. That's actually been my I did a little meme that says rock steady. We're just going to rock steady through all of this. And I think being positive, and I also think giving ideas.
Okay. Love it.
Okay.
Anybody
I'll
else
give
wanna
my,
share?
my 3. I had positivity, positive attitude, a desire to serve, and willingness to learn.
Those are all really good too, Jill.
I put my to the group here, like having the group to bounce ideas and to learn from, my positive attitude and my faith.
I'm glad the group has been helpful to you, Gayleen.
Yes.
Sally or Linda want to share?
I would say I'm willing to adapt. I am positive. I have tried to be positive, and I really care for others.
Linda?
I think being resourceful. You know, I've been, and again, I'm thinking a lot right now about at the hospital. I have a lot of connections, and I know how things work, and I know how to perhaps find creative solutions to problems that maybe arising that be handled some to be the needs of my people that are under me, but also able to kind of challenge them to rise up if they
Going in and out, we're losing you.
like think we get through, you know, what so I'm shining a light on some of the concerns that they have, also have things. I think that's
I'm sorry, Linda, but I didn't catch all that because it was going in and out. Did anybody catch it? I just heard that you were helping allow others to rise up. I did hear that part. Because you had the connections and the different way of looking at things because you've been there a long time. But I think your screen's frozen now, so. Sorry. All right, so we looked at the positive character qualities. So now let's look at 3 character qualities that you have not developed that might affect you negatively in a time of crisis. You're back, Linda. 3 character qualities, and you may not have 3. 3 character qualities you have not developed that may affect you negatively in time of crisis. So what I'd like you to think about once you get that written down is what is a practical step that you can take in the next 30 days to strengthen that. So what is it that you need to strengthen? And then how practically can you go about strengthening that in the next 30 days? Anybody want to share?
Okay, so I will. So I'll go back to the you go first mentality. And I mean, seriously, because I know my team needs a ton. And so I'm on our executive group and I'm on the other groups and I'm talking with friends and I'm figuring out what to do. And I am working on things, but one thing that I have to remember too is not to jump on too many things at once and to figure out one thing that I think that is going to work and really flow with it before I start jumping on something else, because I need to make sure that I really flesh it out and work at it and help my team with one thing at a time, because too much overwhelms me and I think it can overwhelm other people. And also, rely on the other directors on my team to do different things, because they are working on other things that they can share and that can strengthen our group. So other
Yes.
people learning different things and sharing, rather than me being the only person, but really to make sure that I am out there looking, learning, and sharing.
And that you're reaching out to them and asking, okay, what can you share with our overall team to grow our overall team, right?
Mhm.
What are you doing that's successful? Okay. Thank you, Sally. Anyone else want to share something you want to target in the next 30 days and how?
Well, a couple of things came to mind, and like so many of the other things, this is not new stuff. It's been there, but maybe more of an issue now. And one is just like self-discipline for like keeping on track. I'm very easily distracted in life in general. And now even more, more people home all the time that I'm not accustomed to. And so there's a lot of conversations, and, my husband is going to work a few hours, a few days a week. I'm not used to him being home. And he's only used to being home like on the weekend when I'm available. You know what I mean? So he's not necessarily accustomed to, yeah, I know you're home, but I still have things to do. It's not Saturday or Sunday where I might be like backing off a little, you know what I mean? So that's an adjustment. And I'm not very good at the self-discipline part on my side. And the other thing that's kind of hand in hand with that is being consistent. And so when I am doing things, so I've got this self-discipline to, I need to focus and get some stuff done, but also the things that I am doing it consistently, instead of like, oh, well, this is a good thing to do. And so I did it for a little while. And then you guys may, having been doing this for a long time, have those things like, well, I used to do that. That worked really well. That was a good idea. Why did I stop doing that?
Right.
So which that can be sometimes from years and years ago, but there also are things that I do that are good things to do, but I don't do it consistently because I kind of get that, oh, now I'm distracted by something else. So I think they're very closely linked. The consistency and the discipline, are kind of two sides of the same coin. But so as far as how to work on it, that's a good question. I don't know. Anybody have any suggestions? Because it's like I said, it's not new to me that these are areas that could use improvement. So clearly I have not solved them yet. So I don't know. Is that something that you guys have any, similar experience with, or
I
you
think
like?
we all have done things and we think, why did we stop doing that? I mean, I think that
Sure.
Yeah. Well, that part of it, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I've had the past 2.5 years, I've run a cafe full 6 days a week, as well as running my Pampered Chef business. So it's just been crazy. Well, now that stopped, and I really feel a sense of renewal. And that was like when we talked yesterday about I want to go back with really good, strong habits, because things have changed a lot in 2.5 years. Yeah. I was running, by the seat of my pants for 2.5 years. Now I can be a little bit more proactive, but I want to make sure that I'm being as smart, proactive as I can.
Well, I think that's part of I think sounds like you're doing a great job of that transition from being that busy. When I look back to when I started Pampered Chef, I had an infant and a 2-year-old, and then had 4 more kids after that. In many ways, I was more productive when I had 6 young kids to deal with, for a while. Then I ended up kind of stepping back somewhat because it was just, after that 5th and 6th kid and, wars and everything, things changed. But early on, I think about, how did I do this when I had, like an infant and 2 and 4 and 6-year-old with me every day? And yet that was some of my strongest time early on in my business. So now it's almost like I have too much time, because it's not required of me to be as disciplined. So I have to impose that on myself, and I'm not always very good at it. So that's, kind of where Karen, kudos to you for going from a really busy time to a time when you could have come off of that and continued to just kind of fly by the seat of your pants and watch a lot of TV or, something like that, So, I think that's, it sounds like you've handled that really really well, but so anyway.
It's an illusion.
To answer your question, Jill, I think that consistency comes from having systems in place that you do day in and day out,
Mhm.
same time of the month, same day of the week,
Mhm.
each week. And all that goes back to structuring your day and structuring
Mhm.
your calendar, which is back to my Google Calendar.
By the
I
way,
do feel like some of my systems are lacking for sure, and my team, director team.
Yeah.
We've talked about this a lot, and we're in different places. Some have little kids, some work
Mhm.
full time besides Pampered Chef, and so it's not, it's not like we can come up with something that it works in the same way for every person as far as the details of it. But the stuff that needs to get done is pretty universal, among
Right.
us, as far as that kind of thing goes. And,
Right.
so we've worked somewhat on that, haven't really come up with something, or I feel like we've had some good progress on the systems, not so much on the implementation,
Gotcha.
and that's where there's a disconnect that I've got. Well, yeah, I've got sort of this concept of what to do and when to do it and that sort of thing. I'm dropping the ball on the actual putting it into practice. So
Yeah.
that's my struggle. That's my cross to bear.
perhaps we could mention that next week Stephanie has agreed to teach us Outlook at 4:00 Eastern time. So we'll be using her Zoom link. It's the same the Zoom link as this one, right, Stephanie?
Yep.
So you're all
I think
invited.
so.
If you'd like to join us, I'm excited.
So when do we have a day and time for that? I know it was kind of
Tuesday at 4:00 Eastern
Tuesday at
time.
4:00 Eastern or Central?
Eastern.
Right
4:00
after
Eastern.
Power.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Yeah.
So 3
That's when in
o'clock.
Power.
And what is
Right after Empower.
Oh,
Ends.
that's right. We have that. Yay. We have that next week.
We're going to keep the workshops going.
Awesome.
So as soon as it's over, we can
Yeah.
jump on. And I don't think it'll take us long. I mean, I can screen share and I don't think it's rocket science. Don't come expecting to. I'll just show you what I've shown Love Carpenter, what I've shown Stacey, and so what I've shown other people, like how I do
Mhm.
Google Calendar, and I'll tell you a little bit about how I structure it and what's on my list every month, I guess.
That sounds awesome. Thank you.
Stephanie, if
That-
you could record that would be awesome. I don't know if you're willing to do that. It's my
Yeah.
husband's birthday that day. I'm trying to hop off and after Empower and spend a moment with
Sure.
him. So,
Sure.
Well, I'd love to be able to share it. So yeah, I think we planned it.
Mhm.
Okay.
It might make your life easier too, Stephanie.
All right. Anybody else want to mention a character quality that you need to work on developing before we wrap up?
I want to be perfect.
I don't think that's possible for any of us, Karen.
So is it the perfection that you need to work on, or is it the desire, the feeling like you want to be perfect?
No, if you know me, I have no desire to be perfect. I will not put that pressure on myself at all. Way
That's
too
probably a
real.
good idea.
Way too real.
All right. Well, I hope this has been helpful for you guys today. And so remember, no call tomorrow. And then we will meet on Friday at 2 Central, 3 Eastern and wrap up. Okay?
Okay. Sounds
Thank
good.
All right.
thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
good
See you guys.
Bye.
Thanks
Yeah,
for being
bye.
on. Bye.
There.